Joining me now here on the Rich Eisen Show, one of the best in the business, and he is joining us with a ton going on in the association and the rest of the sports world, along with Tony, part of the Emmy Award winning and once again nominated, pardon the interruption, Michael Wilbon. How are you, Michael?
Rich, I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well. Let me just jump straight into it with you. What do you take out of Eastern Conference semifinal Game 7 in Boston? Do you take something out of it for the Celtics' ability to move on, or you take something out of it that the Sixers need to do something in order for them to move on? What do you think?
Well, I guess there's an ordering of the priorities, right, in terms of what we leave that with. And it's hard not to leave with looking at the Sixers and just shaking your head and saying, wow, again. And it's not that they lost Game 7, it's that they lost 6 and 7. 6 had to be the game that they played a lot better in. Their MVP, the league MVP, Joel Embiid didn't get a shot the last 4.5 minutes. I mean, that was their shot. And so I'm less, I'm not going to say I'm impressed by the Celtics because I don't think they've been as good, Rich, as we saw them last season. And I think part of it is, the head coach's stubbornness not to use the lineup that he finally used. With Rob Williams in there on the court in the starting lineup. The small ball is not something I'm in love with, and so many coaches and players and people in the industry are. But I think that the Celtics, the last 2 games, that's the Boston Celtics team that needs to show up and play against Miami, or else they could be upset. But that came after, Embiid, Harden, and look, I've been aware of Doc Rivers since I was a teenager because we grew up in Chicago at the same time. And I root people like, who do you root for? I root for my friends, and Doc and I have been that for decades. And this is a hard one. This is a tough one. And again, you can't talk about the failure of the Sixers without dealing with Game 6. That's when you have to put the Celtics away, and they couldn't do it.
Yeah, and then Embiid afterwards gave Doc a very significant, I would say, vote of confidence. Harden was the exact opposite, saying, our relationship is okay. And Embiid was raving about Doc, and one would think he wouldn't if you want to ascribe the lack of shots for Embiid or the lack of, posting Embiid up when he had the advantages in Game 6 and 7. He would lay that, I imagine, at the coach's feet, and he didn't. What did you make of of Embiid's comments of it's 5-on-5, and him and Harden needed some help, is what it sounded like to me in that soundbite.
I mean, there's a genuine affection between Embiid and Doc Rivers, and not necessarily so with James Harden. Let's face it, this is not new for James Harden. With how many coaches? A half dozen? He's been difficult. He's been difficult. In the best of times, Rich, difficult. MVP times, difficult. A failed playoff player. I mean, we've seen Harden. Yesterday was nothing new. That's dotted his career in the postseason, which is double-digit years now. So that didn't sort of jump out at me as much. For whatever failing, and part of the failing of not taking those shots is he's got to go on Embiid. I mean, basketball is a player sport, and no matter how much the coach may diagram things for you and overload things for you, we hear great former players say all the time, you got to demand the ball. And if it needs to be in the huddle, if it needs to be on the floor, him grabbing Maxey or Tobias Harris by the collar of the jersey and saying, give me the damn ball. We know that's what Shaq not only would have done, did. We know that's what Michael Jordan not only would have done, did. We know, my God, Larry Bird used to call Kevin McHale some names we can't even repeat. That's what he did. And so if you're MVP and it's your team, it's also your ball when you need it. And it shouldn't have to come down to any coach diagramming plays. I voted for Embiid this year as MVP. I did. But that's, yes. Do I want to see Doc do some things to get Embiid freed in those last few minutes in Game 6? Absolutely, Rich, yes. That's the reputation Doc Rivers has had among players and why so many, Harden not included, want to play for him. is that they think that Doc is great in those situations. And whatever happened that broke down in Game 6, everybody failed. But Harden seems to be, I won't say that top of the list. Embiid's the MVP. But Harden, we've seen do this over and over again. It shouldn't really surprise anybody.
Michael Wilbon here on the Rich Eisen Show. The sense going into Game 7 in Boston is that whichever team lost would be bouncing their coach, and the sense of that was heightened by the fact that Monty Williams was cut loose by the Suns. Matt Ishbia bouncing the two-time coach of the year, who also, look, I'm already going to, I've never met him. I just love the way he handles his business. I've heard nothing but great things about him, and I understand there's a difference between personal and business. But this is a head-scratcher for me, Michael. I wonder what that firing led for you to do.
Well, it's a complex one, Rich. Much more complex than probably any other coach this year that's going to get bounced, and we know it's going to happen. It happens this time of year. It's already been bounced. Monty Williams is just what you perceive he is. He's a gentleman, a scholar and a gentleman, and a great coach, an astute basketball observer in every way imaginable. I talk about Doc Rivers and knowing Doc pretty all my life. Monty Williams, because I work in Washington D.C. and cover sports, and Monty, I've been following Monty and knowing who he is since he was 15. He was a teenager in D.C., which is where he grew up. And Monty Williams' reputation is as untouchable as anybody in the NBA right now, and it's been that way for years. And he's coach of the year, as you said, twice. And Chris Paul and Devin Booker love him. And having said all that, when they were going through that loss in Game 6 themselves, down 30 whatever to Denver at home, it was the second straight year they were getting bounced out of a playoff like that. And I was on the phone between text messaging and actual phone calls. We know with a lot of people, as we do, as you know you do as well, when these things are coming up. And I just said, Monty's going to be gone this week, isn't he?
Really?
And the answer is, yeah. I love him. I don't just know – I know him. He's adored here. I'm sitting in Scottsdale, Arizona right now. He's not just – he's adored here. He really is. But there's not an outcry, Rich. People are saying they didn't like it or they're confused, like you said, a head-scratcher. Rich, they lost at home back-to-back playoff elimination games where they were down 30-plus at the half. So something's wrong. Something's wrong. And I thought that last year when they lost Game 7 to Dallas, which they had owned in the first two games of that series, and they lose 4 straight. And I was like, okay, what is going on here? This is not strategic. What is happening? This is not about pick-and-roll play or coverage. It's not. When basketball teams with those kinds of talents, and by the way, people who get along, the Phoenix Suns, they have had drama. They don't have that. We're not talking about the Memphis Grizzlies with Ja and his situation. We're not. But they didn't figure it out. And so they come into another year and they wind up going out the same way. And I'm just like, you know what? Matt Ishbia, who I'm getting to know here, is a new owner, an aggressive, bold owner. He's not having this. He didn't bring Monty in, and this is not going to work. I say that knowing that Monty Williams will get another gig, and he'll be good at that too, maybe even great at it. But this situation was like, oh boy, you can't lose back-to-back playoffs at home on your court like that. So, no, it was anything but surprising. Now, the one thing they all should have done, and I don't know if James Jones survives this either, and he's been great at what he does in putting his roster.
Yeah, I honestly, I can't. I understand the way of the world, Michael, and I understand the way of, winning is the most important thing, but it's not like they were losers, and James Jones put this roster together. I mean, good Lord. I mean, I don't understand how I guess a different voice will help. I don't know. I don't know. I don't get
it. I think it's better because you can't you can't lose like that with those players. Not like that. I mean, remember, you're in the finals, and you're the number one seed. The Suns last year were the only team in the league that won 60 games. I think they won 64 games last year.
Right.
They're the number one seed at home, up 2-0 to start the series. Now, to me, and so our dear friend Stephen A. has blamed DeAndre Ayton, has laid it at his feet entirely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going there, but I'll lay it at his feet mostly. But I'm going to lay it at the feet of the people who run the team too, because they should have let him go. When Indiana matched it, they should have either traded him in advance or let him walk, because he is the only piece that didn't work. DeAndre Ayton, as physically talented as he is, and so they should have let him or traded him before this trade deadline. And I'm sure they wanted to. I know he was definitely included in any offer to Brooklyn for Kevin Durant, but they didn't want him. And people around the league know of both of Ayton's talent, but also his pouting and his difficulty. And so that's the piece where you go, oh, wait a minute. And for letting Ayton still be there in that game, everybody's gonna, not everybody, but we've seen one takedown, we may see another.
Michael Wilbon here on the Rich Eisen Show. So much more to get to, so let me just jump right into the next subject matter. If you were Bob Myers of the Warriors, you do what coming off of the loss to the Lakers, who are honestly, I know fans are somewhat sick of the Lakers, even though, they haven't done much since the bubble. They are, if you will, the Cowboys of the NBA. So a lot of folks get fatigued, but what they have done is remarkable. If you are the Warriors, though, you do what now? What do you do, Michael?
Well, if I'm the Warriors, I try to make sure that I can keep Bob Myers. That's number one.
Right.
Bob's going to have or has opportunities right now. And Draymond Green referred to that the other night, that he hopes that Bob Myers stays when you're talking about his own situation.
Right.
And so, Bob's the architect of this. There's no buts about it. Although, they made a couple of mistakes. Well, who doesn't? What personnel people don't in professional sports, and particularly at the highest level where Bob Myers has made a lot more great decisions than mistakes. But the first thing the Warriors, you keep them unless you have your eye on somebody where you go, this is our next guy. And you could have that. If you're Bob Myers, you got to figure out in terms of spending money, because the owners have talked privately about that with various people at various times, hushed tones. And look at the luxury tax bill. I'm not sitting in front of that number, Rich, but it's huge already. They paid Jordan Poole a bunch. That I don't know that that's a great decision as it's going to turn out. Draymond Green is up for next, either opting in or being a free agent. What do you do at 33 years old with Draymond Green? So you got a lot going on. Is Klay Thompson – first of all, you're not going to get rid of Klay Thompson, but can Klay Thompson be any more at this age with all the wear and tear on his legs? Can he be the Klay Thompson who's going straight to the Hall of Fame on the first ballot and is one of the 3 greatest shooters to ever live? So you got some big questions to answer if you're still there. And maybe this is when Bob Myers says, you know what? This has been the greatest run imaginable. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go over here across the street because here's what they got going on. And it could just be Tom. He's allowed. He can say, I did it. We did it. We all did it. I love it. I mean, the last dance doesn't just pertain to the Chicago Bulls necessarily. So I personally don't think these Warriors, this group will win another championship. I don't. Would I try to put them back to keep them together? Of course I would try. But I don't. I just think the caravan moves on. There are too many good teams out there, Rich. Look how many good teams. You mentioned the Lakers. We've never seen in the NBA, and by never, I mean never, seen a league where a half dozen teams could win a championship in a year. That's not how this sport is. That's how pro football is. It's not pro basketball. Mm-hmm. Pro basketball is about the journey of the 2 or 3 best teams, and can someone knock any or all of them off? That's pro basketball in a star-driven sport. And so I don't know that there are a lot of people coming, man. There's teams in small markets that are great. Like Oklahoma City's got 1 million draft picks and young players who are like a young Golden State probably right now.
Yeah, and somebody's going to get rich with Victor Wembanyama in about 24 hours too. And and we haven't mentioned the Nuggets. You mentioned DeAndre Ayton looking the way that he did. Maybe Jokic can make virtually anybody look like that. And the rest of the shooters around him and the rest of that team. You're right. I mean, anybody can win it right now. I mean, you really can. So who do you put?
So many teams that can.
Yeah, the Heat too.
One of them.
The Heat too.
I'm not going to say nobody paid attention, but we didn't pay attention at the level that we do because you got to prove it first.
Mm-hmm.
But Jokic is a marvel, Rich, and you're West, and I know you can still watch even with the hours you keep, you can still see.
Oh yeah.
See the best players across the country. But back east, where I am, sometimes. I split my life now. People don't know Jokic because he's playing at best at 9, and starting at 9:30 Eastern a lot of nights.
Yeah.
And in the West, he's probably 50 of his games are later than that. And they don't see him. And you can't learn to appreciate Jokic from SportsCenter. That's not how it works. You got to see him, and people are going to really get to see him for the first time. And I can't wait to see what the reaction is to him. I voted for Embiid this year.
Mm-hmm.
But a couple of years ago, I voted for Jokic. Right now, Jokic is the best player on the planet. Yes, above Antetokounmpo, above Embiid, above Durant, above everybody. Jokic, for the way he's played this postseason.
Last one for you, Michael Wilbon. And if there was any question whether Ja Morant learned his lesson from the suspension that he suffered and watching his team clearly go down in flames. And again, I know how well the team would frequently perform without him, but we understand his value to the Memphis Grizzlies and to the NBA if he plays to his potential without anything else going on. If we thought he learned his lesson, without a doubt, he did not. And I don't get it. I lay this right to you and say, what do you make of this? Help me with this one, Michael.
Well, there's not going to be a palatable answer for anybody, from anybody, or for anybody, because it's sad to see this kid, and I say kid because, what is he, 24? Potentially destroying his career and to start with, hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what's at stake for him. Remember, Nike went ahead with that launch of that shoe. And I don't know what his contract is for with the shoes. But, I mean, Derrick Rose made $200 million when he was an MVP, 15 years ago. Not 15, 2011, so 12 years ago. So what is Ja's contract worth? If Derrick Rose made $200 million. Okay, call it $250, conservatively. Then he's got a soft drink where he's the face of that. Powerade. They hadn't had any athlete on the bottle or lead their marketing campaign in years. They just returned to that. Now, they went ahead with those launches after the first disturbing situation. I can't imagine that's going to be the case now. We're talking about hundreds of millions, Rich. So if there's nothing else, you would say to him, dude, what are you doing? Just what do you think you're doing? You signed your name to this. I don't care how young you are. You signed your name to this. What are you doing to yourself, your career, your life? And, if you talk to, and I have, people in law enforcement and people in security, they'll tell you they're not surprised by yesterday at all. They thought, given who he's with, given what they know about digging into his life, that this is going to happen again and again and again until he fundamentally changes, and they don't know that he will. And the notion that he got it, as you perfectly point out, of course he doesn't get it. He didn't care. Now, I think he gets it in terms of he just thinks he's going to get away with it. He doesn't give a damn, Rich. If you listen to him post-game, there's a lot you can learn because you're talking about a really young guy in the moments after a game. Mm-hmm. In the moments after when they're emotional or their heads are somewhere else or their emotions are somewhere else. Ja Morant is completely and utterly engaged and fascinating in those situations. That requires intellect. Okay? So he's not without it. He just doesn't give a damn. And that's my conclusion. And it's my conclusion drawn with the help of people, again, that I've talked to who have access to the information. If you read the Washington Post reporting weeks before this happened, it's predictable. And going to Florida to be in some facility for a week, so what? That's just show. That's just PR. And so he's got to be suspended indefinitely, at least. Will that change him? I don't know. I don't know him that well. I have a perception of him, and I know the people who really are invested in him have a deep perception. And he's such an asset that the league now, like the league, Rich, should be moving on from LeBron, Steph, which is obviously still great. They should be moving on from, talking about promoting and marketing. Mm-hmm. They should be transitioning to, they've already got on Antetokounmpo in mid-career, to Jokic and to John Morant. They're bright, shining stars in their 20s. But how can they can't include John Morant? With handguns whenever he decides he's going to, and not listening and not giving a damn, basically thumbing his nose at anything and everything. So the NBA is in a sad place with that now. John Morant's in a sad place with that. We've seen sport in general. We know what happened at a couple of universities, with that. And it's, man, what comes next? What do you do to try to answer your original question? The league has to start with suspending him for real. Not 8 games, for real. Not 25. More, for real. And then demanding certain things of him. And that starts with the commissioner. And it starts with not being lenient on this particular situation. He can't afford it. The league can't afford it.
You are the best, Michael Wilbon. Truly, truly, truly.
Kind of you, Rich. Kind of you.
It is
your voice.
Honest, you and Stephen A. and watching you guys with the rest of the crew. Awesome. Love it. Make me smarter. Make me always drop the remote. I'm interested in what you guys say and how you do it. And when you come on here, I never take it for granted. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, listen, man, I appreciate it. And, as we get ready to hit the road for the Western Conference Finals, which our network has exclusively, of course, Turner has the East. And it's going to be an interesting, couple of weeks coming up, both on the court with those games and off the court with Morant but with Jokic. I hope people, stop doing what they're doing and just watch this dude. I think there's a lot of appreciation, there's a lot of growth from the audience, patron standpoint to watching him do his thing, and so I can't wait for that. And I was going to call you a couple of times. I know how busy you are.
No, please.
With the Bears being in the position they were in.
Yes.
This past month.
Yep.
I was as obsessed with draft picks and yield trades potentially as I've ever been, because my team never picks that high. Not even they picked 9th. Yeah, they picked that high. But, of course, that 9 was augmented by the trade they made. So I'm still, I was ready. I was ready for the draft in a way I've never been ready for the draft, hoping that the Bears become more relevant. I can tell the schedule maker doesn't exactly think they're relevant yet.
Well, they got a couple. They got a couple national TV games. They did.
Got a couple. They got a couple. They got a couple. I think they may outplay that. I think that Fields is actually going to take a big jump this year, this season. And look, that's coming from a crazy lunatic fan's perspective. But I like what they did, and I love Fields, and I'm glad we kept him and didn't trade him.
Agreed.
And I'm not saying other people in this draft won't be worthy, but I'm ready to ride with Justin Fields for a while. So I'm wired over that, and now transitioning back into Jokic versus Anthony Davis. How about that?
Well, I know you're a Renaissance man with many friends. When you're here in L.A., let's connect. That's not that is an L.A. thing to say to people, but I truly do mean it.
All right, that's going to happen.
I would like to.
I'm coming out there tonight.
Great.
We're going to do all the games in L.A.
Okay.
So don't be surprised you get a call.
Excellent. Please do. I'll hit you up. And best to everybody. Thanks for the call.
Thanks, Rich.
Michael Wilbon. Check him out on the NBA on ESPN and ABC's coverage. And, of course, pardon the interruption, on the Worldwide Leader. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.